here at the Academy for Jewish Religion. And I too would like to welcome everyone. I just want to very briefly give an outline of the rest of this day. You do have it in your schedules, but I want to make it clear. We have just heard from Dr. Ora Horn-Krauser, who is Executive Vice President and Academic Dean of the Academy for Jewish Religion. And we're about to begin a section of the day we're calling Perceptions. And we will hear from Rabbi Ethan Tucker and Rebecca Enin. And there will be a brief question and answer period following their presentations. And then we'll hear from Rabbi Len Levin and Rabbi Michael Tukowski. And again, there will be a question and answer period after their presentations as well. Right after the first question and answer period, we're going to take a little bit of a break, and then we'll get back going. Then the second part of our presentation today, we're calling Realities. But I do want to mention that your schedules have on it that we'll hear from Rabbi Brad Hirschfield from Klal. And unfortunately, Rabbi Hirschfield is ill and really tried to make it, but in his interest, it's really not right for him to come. He's simply ill, and he feels very badly about it, and we do as well. As Laura said before, we owe him and we owe Klal a great debt. They helped us work through a whole bunch of issues, and presented more issues and more problems in their stead, for which we are appreciative. Second half, after another break, we're calling Realities, and that's sort of a breakout session. There'll be 3 different groupings. I'll remind us of it when we get to it, but in 3 different places, people will have a chance to continue the conversation on how patrilineal descent affects parents and schools in one place, synagogues in another, and youth and young adult settings, including Hillel, birthright, and so on, in a 3rd place. And then finally, we'll come back together again here and wrap up. The first pair that we'll hear from, Rabbi Tucker and then Rebecca Enin, we've given a sort of a catchphrase to their discussion as Jewish status and Jewish identity. And it seems to me that really everyone will hear from today touching on these issues, and as Laura did as well. I've heard Rebecca talk about identity as the way we view ourselves, how we self-identify based on our own experience and what our parents are and so on, as opposed to status, which is the way a community views us, perhaps the legal system. Those 2 views, our identity and our status, sometimes coincide and sometimes do not. And it's a crucial aspect that, as I say, in one way or another, I think we'll hear about from both of our speakers. So, without further ado, I want to call on our first speaker. I do want to make it clear you have extensive bios of everyone. So in the interest of time, I'm not going to read them all. I'll simply say that Rabbi Ethan Tucker is co-founder of Moshe Shiva and Machon Hadar and chair of Jewish law, and we're very, very happy that he's joining us.
Someone can think one thing about themselves and have an institution, a community tell them another thing, and there's very little good way to avoid that being a painful and difficult encounter. What I would suggest as a basic ground rule for maybe not making it less painful, but making it more honest, is that we need, when we talk about this topic, to maximize our transparency. The reason that we take one position or another, a kind of clear acknowledgement of the strengths and weaknesses of different positions. And through that, I think we have the hope of beginning to have actually an honest conversation about this difficult issue. I think this was a topic that in the past, and apparently still in the present, that many feel can kind of be avoided or glossed over. And in my own experience, my feeling is this is an issue that really no longer can be dealt with through avoidance, and must be confronted in a very head-on way, in a way that addresses the data, both of life and of Jewish sources, as opposed to finding ways to hide from or avoid that data. 20 minutes or so is to lay out some of that data from the perspective of the halakhic tradition, the normative sources that have engaged with this question over time, and to give a little bit of a frame around what that might mean. You have a set of sources in your packet, which begins with the catchy title, O Father, Where Art Thou? The Patrilineal Principle of Jewish Identity. I invite you to take those out. I'm going to offer a few framing words. We're then going to take a lightning tour of the issues embedded in there and see where we come. I want to start us off with two basic truths that I think need to frame this conversation. The first of them is that dissent matters. Dissent matters when determining who is a Jew. I have yet to encounter a Jewish community that does not consider the child of two Jews to be a Jew unless they went through some ceremony affirming in some deep way that they were definitely signing on, but that by default a person has no Jewish identity independent of their lineage. That is to say, in a basic sense, for all the division that there is across the Jewish community, there actually still is consensus that having two Jewish parents renders someone, at least who wasn't actively raised in another faith, to be a Jew. And that goes to the fact that a core part of what it has always meant to think about Jewish people, it has been to think about it as something more than just a confessional faith, and something that flows in some way through bloodlines and through genes. What I take that to present to us as self-evident is that one would then expect that who one's father is should matter, and who one's mother is should matter, and that would be the case in both directions. And that's the direction I want to take us in on that front, as one basic truth. The second basic truth, which we'll see in a moment, which is also important to acknowledge for anyone engaging this historical conversation of Jewish normative sources throughout the ages, is that simple ambilineal descent, that is to say, either parent being sufficient for determining Jewish identity, was never, prior to the immediate modern period that we live in now, a standard that Jewish communities adhered to. The sources in the Bible that point to patrilineal descent point to patrilineal descent in a way that makes it very clear that a Jewish mother and a Gentile father would not produce someone of an uncomplicated Jewish identity. And the reverse has also been true. Jewish communities that have endorsed the kind of matrilineal model, but going again in both directions. And I think being honest about the fact that both parents either matter or one parent consistently is ignored have been the two modes through which we have engaged this, and we don't actually have any kind of rich normative tradition that in any way engages the notion that any parent, irrespective of their gender, is sufficient for securing Jewish identity. With those two introductory truths, I want to take us, as I see them, I want to take us through a whirlwind tour of some of the sources here. We're not going to have time to look at them inside. You'll refer to them on your own, but I want to give you a sketch of the main points. On the first page in the packet, you have a collection of some of the main sources in the Bible on the question of Jewish fathers and Gentile mothers. A person with a Jewish father and a Gentile mother. Suffice it to say, the biblical evidence points fairly clearly to someone willing to see it, to a patrilineal stem, which that is to say, an Israelite man who fathers children, independent of the question of with whom he fathers those children would have been reckoned as Israelites, and vice versa, the child of an Israelite woman who gave birth to a child from a Gentile father would not have rendered that child unproblematically a part of the Jewish community, and that person essentially would have been regarded as an outsider in one way or another. There is some shift, and many of you are familiar with this basic narrative over time. There is some shift that happens in the Second Temple period. Something is going on in the book of Ezra where the community is unsettled by the prospect of Jewish men with Gentile wives and their children being a part of their community. And however exactly that story plays out, you can see Shia Cohen and other scholars for a fuller treatment of this. We know that by the time we get to the Mishnah, on page 2, already in the section Roman numeral 2, Mishnah Kiddushin, we have a simple rule at the end of that text. Whenever there is no Kiddushin possible for a woman at all, when a Jewish man fathers a child with a woman that he could not possibly have a Jewish marriage with, the Mishnah rules the offspring follows her. And what is the classic case of this? Someone who has a child with a Gentile woman. That is to say, the Mishnah already articulates what we think of as this half of the patrilineal principle, that patrilineality is simply not sufficient for guaranteeing a Jewish identity or Jewish status, and the child of a Jewish father and a Gentile mother, according to the Mishnah, Havalad Kmota, the status of the child follows the status of the mother. Now, there was some degree of pushback against that position over time. The Talmud Yerushalmi features a very famous example of a non-rabbinic figure seemingly attesting to non-rabbinic Jewish practice where some element of patrilineal descent continues to be practiced. In particular, a man in the town of Tyre who wants to circumcise his son, born to him of a non-Jewish woman, on Shabbat. And the only justification for circumcising someone on Shabbat is that they are understood to be a bona fide Jew. We don't schedule circumcisions as part of a conversion ceremony on Shabbat. And the source in the Talmud Yerushalmi engages this position in order to completely knock it down and wipe it off of the rabbinic map as a plausible position. And that more or less is the story as it plays out on the question of Jewish fathers and Gentile mothers. But with, I think, an important codicil that people forget.